Welcome, Karen.
Welcome, everyone, to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday Night Creator Convos. I'm Noelle Marshall, and I'm here with my beloved Bob Warner.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to have you with us, Joy, and our other guests in timeless time that will be watching this in the future and that are watching on Facebook and the rest of the universe as well. Great to have you, Joy.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be here.
Tell you a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence.
Awesome.
So hold on just 1 second and let me get that up here. So welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence. And I am so delighted to have a new colleague in arms, Joy Gilfilen. And Joy she's gonna blow you away with all that she's up to. Her vision, her action, well, let me just tell you first a little bit about Joy. She is a philosopher, author, producer, train the trainer coach. Yes, I did that. And founder of Intentional Change Network. That's where we're really going to learn about Joy. And she recently launched on noblegoldman.com. So we're going to learn about her new launch. Joy holds the iChange Justice podcast on Spotify, among other civic masterminds. And she recently convened 7 intentional change panels on Humanity Rising. Oh, I love that program that feature many speakers illustrating how they are actively creating change around the world. So her keynote was Standing Up with Power. So Joy, Bob and I are both Peak Potentials alumnus.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So we have that in common as well. And I'm just really ready to hear what you have to say, because we are both spiritual activists. We've been arrested a couple times, and I
didn't do that.
There has to be change. So welcome. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. I'm really looking forward to this presentation. So take it away, Joy.
Thank you so much. I'm truly delighted to be here, because this is like coming home to one of the places where I was first introduced to the concept that we could actually, in fact, change the world. I knew it was possible as a little kid, believe it or not, because it only made sense that we should be able to change the world. If they can spray bug spray on ants and kill entire amounts of ants, I realized that we were actually changing and could potentially kill the entire world just using that bug spray, because I watched the ants die and it broke my heart. And I asked my dad, what are we doing, Dad? I mean, how can't humans figure out that if we could do that to them, what are we doing to us? And his answer to me at the time, I mean, I'm sitting there, this little 5-year-old crying, looking at the bugs dying coming off the anthill. And he said, he says, I've been pondering on that my entire life. And he said, maybe someday, if you ever figure it out, teach it, would you? And I said, yeah, I will. And I didn't realize that was, I didn't realize that was a pact with the universe. And I've done a lot of other things in my life over the course of trying to figure out how in the world we turn the world around, because us humans have become parasites and predators on an earth that is actually our host. And we are unwittingly and unaware of the damage that we cause, most of us, because we're taught that we're separate from the earth, we're separate from nature, and it's really not true. And there was a point at which I asked myself, I was sitting and I was listening. I know what it was. It was the day that I went into the Whatcom Community College, and there was a young woman behind the countertop, and I was working on my son's to turn in admission papers or something for him to go to college. And I had just heard that we had started another war, like we were going to war in Iraq, or I think it was Iraq. And I remember walking in there going, what are we doing? And I expressed my upset with the woman behind the counter. And I said, I just don't get it. What are we doing that we're going to war again? It so upsets me. And this pert young 20-year-old looks up at me and she says, oh, we have to. And I went, what? And she genuinely said, we have to. That's what will make God come back. This is our salvation. We have to have it. We have, and I'm looking at her like she'd grown 9 heads. But I kept smiling, and I thought, wow, I get to explore the idea here, because I don't know this conversation. And I said, so what do you mean? And she said, it's Armageddon, and it's the end. We're going into the end times, and we have to do this ethnic cleansing. And she went on and on and on and on. And I'm just sitting there in total shock. And I said, wow, that's interesting. So you're okay with it? And she said, yeah, the white people, and it was such a shock to me that I just sort of looked there and I absorbed it, didn't argue with her, because she knew what she knew, and she was absolutely determined to believe that this was a good thing. And I walked out of the college and I went and sat in my car. And I went, wow, she is so certain. And I am so certain the other way. What in the world would I have to believe what she believes? And how could I prove or disprove it? and I sort of looked at her and I went, in my mind, I was looking at this and I went, I would have to believe that there is truly evil and good in the world. I'd have to believe that, because she had talked about that there were good people and there were bad people, and the good people, the Christians had, her story was just off the charts. And I went, so for me to believe that evil had to win, it's like I had to have a 50-50 belief system. And I thought to myself, well, what would I have to believe in order to believe that that was true? I would have to believe that there was equal amounts of evil and good, and that there really was an end times where we had to go to battle. And what do I believe about that? And I thought for a while and I went, how many people, the only way I could prove it to myself, forget everybody else's beliefs and stories and everything else, what would I, Joy Gilfilen, need to know and believe in order to believe that there was evil and good, and that we had to do this? And I thought I would have to have 50% of the people I know in the world that I've met would have to be bad, and 50% would have to be good. And then maybe we could justify a war. And I thought, how many people do I actually know in my life that I have personally met, that are actually evil people? And so I'd like to ask you all, how many people do you personally know that you have personally met that are truly evil? And I don't care what measure you use, because I'm going to ask another question and you're going to use the same measure, and you don't have to answer the question to me. I'm asking you to answer the question in your own heart, in your own soul, in your own self. How many people have you genuinely met in your lifetime that are truly evil? And I'll give you a minute to think about that. And then I'd like to ask you another question. How many people have you personally met in your lifetime? I don't care if it's 30 years, 50 years, 80 years. How many people have you met in your lifetime that are fundamentally good or would like to be if they knew how? And so give me a percentage or a number. And in my particular case, when I was talking to myself, I had 3 people that I could consider evil or on the way there. One of them was the Hillside Strangler. And I knew him not directly, but secondhand. He killed one of my girlfriends when I was a student up at Western Washington University. And he was the Hillside Strangler out of Los Angeles. He killed a lot of women. He was a pretty bad dude. Then I had 2 different men that I knew that I had dated or worked with who were fundamentally off base. They were not telling the truth and they were shysters. And so I would have called them headed towards evil, but they weren't necessarily evil yet. They still had a heart and they were still trying to survive. They just didn't know what to do and they were all confused. So that's 3. And at that time, I looked at my life, and I've been a professional trainer, coach, free enterprise developer, person who's worked in multiple countries doing human development work. And I've spoken at conferences where there's 3,000 people in the audience, and I've coached thousands of people online. And so I added it up and I said, you know, let's say that it's 100,000 or 300,000 people, a few 100,000, 3 to 300,000, even if it's only 100,000, 3 to 100,000. What's the ratio of good to evil there? Is it a true story? It just wasn't, not to me. And I thought about that. And I remember thinking when I took one of the courses, Peak Potential, I think it was Harbecker asked the question. He pointed out that, you know, how many millions of people, you know, drive on our freeways through Seattle and don't cause wrecks. And how many wrecks actually happen when there's millions of people making billions of decisions every few hours on our freeways around the world. And I realized what an absurd thought it is that we have to fight evil. What we need to be doing is actually building good and teaching people how to do it. And that's why I'm so honored to be here, because you guys are already doing that. And you've been working with Barbara Marx Hubbard. You've been working with conscious change. You've been working with the co-convergence. You've been working with vortexes and energy. And I'm so thrilled to be here. So with that, I'd like to say that that's the fundamentals that I stand up with. And when I did the Standing Up with Power presentation for Humanity Rising, I was invited to talk about that because in between the time that I asked myself the question of, you know, do I believe in good and evil, and what's the probability of it, and what am I going to do if I have a chance to make a change in the world? How am I going to make it? I got invited to join an organization called the Whatcom County Reentry Coalition, founded by Irene Morgan, a friend of mine from Bellingham, who was originally, she was a businessman, a businesswoman. She actually ran a family business, meat packing business, slaughter on the farm, you know, really good natural systems. And some people will recoil from that because they don't like eating meat. But, you know, years ago, people often slaughtered deer and slaughtered animals. So I understood, and I'm a farm kid originally. So when I ended up at her meeting one day, I went to her meeting in the re-entry. I was invited to a re-entry meeting by a person who used to run a Fortune 500 company, a recruiting company for Fortune 500 people, and for recruiting executives and stuff during the downturn in the 2008-2010 crisis. And he and I had been talking in a sauna at the athletic club about the state of the business and what was happening to business people and entrepreneurs and how hard it was in the market. And he said, you know, Joy, he said, I've got to run right now. I'm late. But if you get a chance, come to the Reentry Coalition meeting, because this would really intrigue you if you're interested in helping people get jobs and make changes, you know, and you got something to sell, come on over. And he gave me his address. And I said, well, I probably won't make it. I have to go to Canada. I'm taking a vacation for the first time in a long time. I had recently been through a divorce and my life was in upheaval, and I wanted to go on this vacation. And I said, but if the plans change, I'll be back, because I have learned that I listen when the universe knocks me on the head or catches my attention, or I get banged on the shoulder for some reason. I show up and I go. And so I was in Vancouver. I took the boat across to Victoria. I'm going to the Butchart Gardens. I'm really happy. I'm supposed to meet a fellow there that I was really interested in. And things didn't quite work the way I thought they might. And I went, universe is telling me I need to go home and go to that meeting, whatever that is. Maybe these guys, if he's working for Fortune 500 people, recruiting people, he might be able to fund my project. I had just produced the Flipping the Joy Switch movie. This one, it's Flipping the Joy Switch, introducing simple tools for building emotional resilience to take control of your life. And I wanted to become the next hero, you know, loud national speaker, teaching people how to do emotional navigation, because I believed I had good stuff. So I drove back across the border, came to the meeting, knocked on the door, and this woman opened the door. Her name's Irene Morgan. I already mentioned her. As far as I knew, she was a slaughter on the farm person. And she was doing this really weird spiritual stuff. And she was dragging people out of the ditch all the time. She was working with homeless people, and that was not my market. And I looked at her and I said, what in the world are you doing here, Irene? And she said, well, I might ask you the same thing. I'm the founder of the Reentry Coalition. And I said, what in the world are you doing? And she says, I'm working with prisoners to help them re-enter society after they've been released from prison. And you could, I mean, had I had false teeth, I would have lost him. I looked at her and I went, Irene, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I drove back from a vacation to talk to you and find out what you're doing. So I guess I'm supposed to come in and figure it out. And she said, well, welcome, come on in. I'd love to have you. It took me an hour. And as I was listening to her talk about what was happening to our prisoners and what happened to people when they came out of prison and the way that the prison industrial complex worked, I got madder and madder and madder. She said I had veins on my neck. I was getting mad. I'm a Taurus. And a bull, when they get angry, they get a little angry. And so I looked at her and I went, I don't know anything about this, but I get it. This is what's killing our country. This is the problem. I don't know anything about it, but it's the only thing that makes sense since the total transformation of our business community in the last, in 2000 and 2001, between 1998 and 2003, I had figured out that our world had basically, our world of business had literally flipped upside down. And I went, okay, Irene, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to join you. I'm going to help you figure it out because we have to. Our kids are being destroyed with the movies, the entertainment industry, all the violence. We are going to war in places that we have no business doing this, and we are destroying ourselves as an entire generation of people, the silent generation, the baby boomer generation. We're leading us into destruction. I will help you. And I don't know what I can do, but I'll help you. And she said, thank you very much. And since that point in time, I stopped trying to sell my product because I realized that the product I was selling, while true and while valuable, I needed to test it and use the model to turn around the mass incarceration industry, to turn around our business community, and to actually flip the joy switch, which is what I call it, and switch us to a different platform. I needed to actually put my work put my money and my effort and my heart and my passion where my mouth was before I started talking. So I put it all on the back burner. I went and started studying. I'd already been through Peak Potentials. I'd already been through the CEO Space International. I'd already done all this work. I knew that there was a huge market out there, but I wasn't ready to talk. So I want to share my screen. And I guess I'd like to ask before I start on my PowerPoint, Noelle and Bob, do you guys have any particular questions for me before I start on the PowerPoint? Did I do a good introduction of where I'm at?
I think you've done a wonderful job. And
Okay.
I do have a few things I want to ask. Irene Morgan is with the Reentry Coalition. Is that?
It
did I get
actually,
right?
at one point, we had to rename it. It's the Restorative Community Coalition today. And you can look it up at therestorativecommunity.org.
TheRestorativeCommunity.org. Now, is
Yes,
it the same thing as like when they do restorative circles or restorative justice?
Yes, restorative circles, restorative justice, transformative justice, social justice,
Okay.
reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. It's all different versions of the same work, but the whole point is to focus on the human, to focus on allowing these people to say when they make a mistake and cause a problem, to say, I'm sorry, to correct whatever they can to help restore the people. It's restitution as part of what we talk about. It's reconciliation. I mean, the work is being done. It's related to the Innocence Project. It's all of the things that we're trying to do to restore honor and integrity, because many of the people who end up in the prison industrial system, it's just not right. And the proportional, I want to put this in here because I'll forget later maybe, but when we talk about the prison industrial complex and they talk about how we have roughly 4 million people arrested in the world, I mean, in the United States, we're talking about prison convicted felons. We're not talking about the other 10 to 14 million people that we are catch and release. We're arresting and releasing in repetition across the country in the same year. Yeah. So the damage we're causing, and I just brought another friend online who's a global economist, and she started doing some analysis for me because I'm not an analyst. You know, she's an analyst. She's done data work. And she came back, she called me up yesterday. She said, you know, Joy, she said, I just started doing some numbers and I realized that the United States, if you took the United States apart in 50 states and each was a country, and we stacked it up next to all the other countries in the world, including dictatorships and whatever, she said 20 of the United States would take the top 20 slots of the most number of incarcerated citizens.
I can believe that. We're way out of proportion with the rest of the world.
Oh my God, it is so upside down.
It's a business.
It is a business. And once I realized that that's what we were dealing with, it's a different kettle of worms. It's not a moral problem. It's not a social issues. It's not bad behavior. It's bad leadership. If you want to use the word bad, it's flawed leadership. It's false stories. It's incredible. Oh, Debbie David just pointed out in the chat, Debbie is one of our members of the Restorative Community Coalition who's been with us for a long time. And she just pointed out that there's a person arrested in the United States every 3 seconds. And when that's,
and the laws are getting crazier and crazier. I don't want to take away from your presentation, but if we have time later, I'll tell you about a new law in Tennessee.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. So we'll go there. Did you have another couple of questions before I go into my PowerPoint?
No, I think you're ready to launch. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Okay, well, one of the reasons that I'm really excited about launching today is because it's taken me a while since I chose not to start marketing too soon. It took me a while to sit back on my heels and look at what did I actually know and what did I believe in and who was I? And one of the things that I did, actually, in fact, one of the reasons I was up in Canada was to ask a friend of mine who was a civil engineer to draw this picture for me. And he drew it because I was trying to explain to him, he was a Native American fellow, and he was awesome. I'd been with him at the CEO space. No, it wasn't, it was Peak Potentials. He had been there with his wife, and we'd had this intense conversation with the two of them. And he told me about the reservation schools and the challenges of the Native American people in Canada. And we had a really intense week of working together at a meeting. And so I went there to meet him and his wife, and to have him help me draw what I knew to be true, but I couldn't draw. And he was a civil engineer. And so he pencil sketched this for me. As I explained to him, he spent a whole day just listening to me talk. And he started to draw a picture for me about how the world works based on the story I told him. And the reason I came up with this particular image in the story is because I'm a mom and I'm a farm kid. And I have worked with Native philosophies all my life, but specifically, I didn't even know it. My dad grew up in the Oklahoma Territory. His father was an Indian trader. But one of the things that he had taught me was that life is sacred. And I believed it, and I witnessed it, and I watched it. And when I got pregnant with my first son, I felt the pregnancy happen. I felt it when the egg and the sperm connected in my belly, in my system. I felt it. I could feel the lights go off all over the place, and I could feel the electrifying thing that happened inside my uterus, and my body charged. It completely changed. And I remembered that when I started looking at, okay, so how does the world work? I asked Mother Earth one day. I was banging on the earth, and I was trying to figure out why we were killing our kids. I'd had another one of these awakenings where I went into the school and I saw these children eating absolutely horrible food, and I watched them spin off when they were eating all of this wasted food. And I realized that most of the food they were eating was psychedelic, with reds and greens and yellows and synthetics. And I remember going home and banging on the earth going, if I was the only person in the universe, and I was a mom in Bellingham, and I have no influence, and if it's true that I could change the world, what would I need to know to change the world? Because I got to do it. I can't continue to let our kids die, and I can't continue to build a business and to do what I've been doing and teach business the way it's been taught, because we're all out to lunch. We're doing the wrong stuff. We're killing our kids in the alternative health industry. I was in that. And with all the pharmaceuticals and the drugs, and with our education, with all this stuff, I just knew that we were killing our children, and I couldn't do it. So I stopped going that way, and I asked Mother Nature to talk to me, and I said, you got to teach me. And what I realized is that the world, it was like out of the darkness came this phrase, and they said, change is the only constant. The world spins 365 days a year, 24/7. Nothing is ever the same. So if I was Mother Earth, what would I need to know to manage change in the universe? That's what I went back, and they said, you'd have to understand that life comes from nothing. It comes from life force, this desire to life, to be alive. And it grows by itself, by your desire to be alive. And it expands and it develops from nothing into matter, into something. Once you're born at 9 months, if you go around this cycle, I'm going to talk more about it in a few minutes, but basically when you're first inside, if you see this as the uterus of the universe, or you see this as two little cells, the sperm and the egg cell, that get connected inside the uterus, these two cells start to duplicate and multiply, and they become 27 trillion cells before you're born. And when those 27 trillion cells pop out of you, They come out of squalene and awake, and they're a bundle of high electromagnetic energetic charge that's united in current. We are moving a flow of energy through the universe, and we see stuff and we go, what in the world just happened to us? And then we scream. Typically they bang us on the belly or on the butt, and they shake us around, at least in Western culture, which is crazy. And we scream, and then we start to figure out how to move. And then everything after that cascades in a natural learning curve, because we have to adapt to a world where we're not drinking the amniotic fluid anymore. We actually have to breathe without water. We have to learn how to build our body. We have to learn how to connect our brain and our nervous system to the world around us. We are an amazing sensory awareness system, a new apparatus, trying to figure out how in the world we're going to navigate a world. So the bottom line is, I built this model, and it's basically, the model is a 9-step growth model. We come out from this protected environment and we start to grow, and we see, we talk. Eventually, in the first 9 months, we learn to crawl. That's moving our matter from being stuck to being able to manifest and move around. And then we start to stand up. Once we stand up, we get into stuff. We start to walk and crawl and climb. We get in trouble, so we fight back, because you want to go places. You're alive. You want to explore, and mom says no, or dad says no. And so you have to sit back and say, well, what got her attention to made her pull me out of that chair, or out of that room? And you think about it, you assess what's going on in the world. And if you're smart, you sneak, and you sneak back into that other work, or you learn how to run faster so that you can get into the other room, so that you can learn more and explore more. And then she grabs you and she takes you back, or he does. And this, interestingly enough, when I started talking about this pattern, I took it to a friend of mine, Chattiscatum Wichtalem. He was an elder of the Lummi Nation here, a spiritual elder. And I talked to him about this. And I said, well, how can I tell this story authentically in the most human way, in the most useful way? I said, should I use the growth of a seed, like the birthing of a seed and how it grows and becomes a tree, and then we're the tree of life and all that? He said, no. He said, talk about it as humans, because all of us do remember that we grew up from nothing, and we remember exploring, and we remember talking and growing and getting in trouble and either chased backwards and shut down, or moving forward. So this thing is a reciprocating pattern that goes both directions. And what I did, and thank you to my friend for writing this out, because he helped me to see that what we were doing here was organizing our body, our physical body. We were developing our mind and our ability to think here and move our matter around. And then we are spiritually divine, and we have an intentionality about us. We have a will. We have a power of will. Anybody who's fought with a 2-year-old knows this. Try to shut a 2-year-old down who's determined to go someplace. It's work, because little kids and 2-year-olds, they have not learned not to do things that you don't want them to do yet. So they haven't been preconditioned to mind you. And so that will is the power of the spirit. And we want to integrate everything that's going on out there. We have a voracious appetite to learn, and we start going around and around and around this pattern for the rest of our lives. And it's like a growth rings on a tree. So one of the things I did is I made it pretty so that people in the market could like looking at it. And this is the body, this is the mind, and this is the spirit. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, because the thing that excites me is the co-creators convergence. Those of you who are part of this group, you're on the cutting edge of the cutting edge of the cutting edge. And you're in a position that when you understand the power of will, and you understand it from compassion, not from the fight or flight standpoint, but from the desire to create life, to support life, to nourish life, to grow life, to heal the planet and help the planet rebirth itself and grow into a new age. You can do that from this quadrant if you understand, and when we understand what's holding us back. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. That's why I'm talking about fear-mongering, versus joy producing. When you can become one of the joy producing organisms on the planet, we can influence all other and create this massive emotional infection of love, joy, and happiness. So my middle name is Joy, and I use that because and for a while I didn't want to use the word because people thought, oh, joy to the world, that's really passe. But the fact of the matter is, I am helping to bring joy to the world. Unleash the joy in each one of your hearts and the love and compassion for life. And we can light up this world and change it. So I'm not shy about it anymore. I'm learning to brand it and to work with it. And as I'm looking right now, I'm looking at the co-creators convergence image, and whoever created that image, I don't know if Barbara did it or if one of you guys did it, but that image is phenomenal. So that's the same thing, just different, run in a different direction. So thank you for creating that. So I'm going to move the slide, and I realize that I look over at the slide periodically instead of looking at you guys, but I've got it on a different screen. So I apologize if I'm doing it. So I'm going to try more to look at you. The point of having this project and having this model is it helped me to understand when I was studying the question of why are we killing the planet? What is it about fear-mongering that hooks us into self-destruction? What is it about joy producing that moves us into a different place? And it required me studying a whole pile of different philosophies. That's why I've developed the intentional change philosophies. It required me going down deep into multiple different technologies. I studied energy medicine. I studied organic living foods. I studied how the body grew inside the uterus. I studied metaphysics. I've studied, and I'm not listing this for any reason other than to say that no matter how many disciplines, philosophies, or religions you go through, at the roots of it, it all comes back to the same thing. We are human beings in a living universe, in a living world, and we change because of the world changes us, and we change the world. It's a cause and effect world. We are at cause, and we are at effect. And the tipping point, the thing right here in the center of this thing, which is right down here at the choice point, is your heart. And your heart is the thing that connects you to the universe and to the roots of the earth. And until we recognize the power of our heart, we can't change the world, because not productively, because most of the universe, most of our commercial systems, most of our institutions, the fact that the mass incarceration industry has become like this huge mega weight on us, it's holding people back, and it's harnessing all this human potential into concrete buildings, and then punishing us for being creative and different and striving and making mistakes. People make mistakes all the time, and then we get punished for it, and the more you get punished, the worse it gets. So the opposite is true. So I built a model, and it's called the fear triangle model here. The persecutor victim rescuer is based upon the model that Stephen Cartman, the Cartman drama triangle, talks about. That's the basis of the model. The body, mind, spirit model is the idea that our body, our mind, and our spirit are part of this living universe, and we move in spirals from past to the future, and the food we eat and take in turns into eyeballs, hair follicles, and hormones, over time. So as we turn it into energy, we turn it into physical matter, we turn it into nervous systems and things that help us motate, move around the planet. We are an integrated living system at work in a living universe. That's pretty cool. But here's the trick, is that if all we do is sit and meditate on it, be really happy about it, and celebrate on it, that's great. But as soon as you leave from your private little cocoon and you move out into the world where you've got to deal with the law enforcement, and you've got to deal with the justice systems, and you've got to deal with the pharmaceutical companies and these various corporations that are running the world today, it can easily pull you right back into this fear model, and it's easy to become fearful. So if we need to move from fear, what is the thing that replaced fear? Many people say it's love. I challenge that question, because love is not, I mean, I can love even when I'm breaking something. I can love, and there's crimes of passion and there's passionate love. So love is actually ubiquitous to all. It's the desire to love, to be alive, to live, to grow, to become. The difference between fear and the opposite of fear, I actually figured out, was joy. Because the only time that you can, I mean, think about it. If you're standing on the top of a mountain and you're going to jump off on one of those paraglider thingies, it's exciting and it's really scary and it's fear-based. And a lot of people do it as extreme athletes, and they climb mountains and do crazy things in the world because it's fearful. But what they do is they learn to corral the fear, to harness their own fear, to manage it and package it and put it to work using courage. And then they do these things that are extraordinary. People will jump out of perfectly good airplanes to save somebody's life. It's an adrenaline rush, and they'll admit it. And it's scary. And yet it's the joy of having achieved the results, saved a life, gotten back in, gotten safe. That joy is just ebullient. It's ebullient, or whatever the word is. It's enthusiastic. So joy is the thing that can remove fear. And if you turn on the light, it's like you turn on the light in a room, it removes darkness. You didn't have to remove darkness. You had to turn on the light. So the point here is that this model is all about doing this. And I'm going to be teaching this as a curriculum on the Intentional Change Network, and I'll be announcing that soon. So I'm not going to go into why did I pick all these positions, but in shorthand, I did this for my sons, my young men, as they were graduating from high school, moving into college. I was working with 2 of my own sons who were varsity athletes, and about 20 kids, because each one of the kids had the varsity basketball team that I was working with, or the varsity athletic teams. And I was observing at the turn of the century, around 2009, 2010, that era, that how many people that I knew that were parents that were so busy, and they were so afraid because the world had changed, and many of them were losing their jobs or their homes, and they were hurting. Their kids were hurting. It was the period of time during rap music, and all the video games were changing, and people were basically crazy. I mean, they were drinking, they were partying, they didn't know what to do with themselves. They were afraid. And I looked at my sons one day and I said, you know what? And it was specifically my eldest son, Derek. And I said, what am I going to have to do? I teach people around the world how to create change. And it doesn't appear that you guys are, all these kids that I've coached, you're not listening. Something's up here. And I need to hear from you. What can I do to help you guys navigate the future? Because right now, I know as a mom, I have to cut the leading strings. That's a horse conversation. If you're a cowgirl, you got to cut the leading strings. And eventually, these things have to grow by themselves. And I said, so I'm going to have to cut you boys loose. And you're going to be out in the world trying to navigate. And frankly, right now, you're making some pretty bad choices. And you're going to sink. And I don't want you to sink, but I can't help you anymore. I mean, I've done everything I know how to do. So you got to tell me, what do I need to do? And he said, let me think about that, Mom. I'll get back to you. So he came back and he said, Mom, and I'm a salesman. So he used sales techniques on me, of course, because he's learned. And he said, Mom, let me ask you a question. 30 years ago, when you graduated from school, what did you have to do in order to buy a phone? I went, well, are you serious? And he said, yeah. He said, think about it. I said, well, when I graduated from high school, which would have been in 1974 or so, all I had to do was call my neighbor up. He hooked up phones. He was the telephone guy. And all I had to do was call him up and say, hey, get me a phone. And he said, okay. And he came over and climbed the telephone pole, got me a phone, hooked me up with Ma Bell, and I got a bill for $25, and it's all done. And he says, well, I'd like you to compare that to what it takes to buy a phone today. This was 2009. The new cell phones had come out. The Apples were out there. The iPhones were out there. It was going to cost, it cost kids at that time roughly $500 to buy a current phone. You had to make a decision about all these different technologies, which phone, which applications, what were you going to use it for, what contract were you going to buy? You had to sign off on a 2-year contract. And if you failed the contract, you had to put a huge deposit damage down. And if you canceled the contract, they were going to come after you for this thing. And he said, and by the way, you know, when we went to the mall and we signed that contract, that set of papers was this tall. And he said, I'm just a high school kid. Yeah, I've graduated, but you know what? I don't know how to read all that legalese. I don't even know what I signed. I don't even know how to use this phone. I don't know anything about it. It's overwhelming, Mom. And I thought, you know what? He's right. And he said, our entire world is like that, Mom. He said, when I get in my truck, and he had a really beautiful hot rod truck that his dad had helped him build, and he was really proud of it. He was going to college, working full-time, going to school full-time or part-time working and going to school full-time. And he said, I can't afford to put the gas in the car because at the time the gas prices were up around $4 or $5. He said, I can't do it. I'll probably never be able to own my own house. The world's in a mess, Mom. And just listen to the news. The world's in a mess. I have no hope. Most people have no hope. You're the only one. And I don't understand what you're talking about. So I'll tell you what, Mom, here's what you got to do. You got to draw me a picture. Give me one picture. Tell me one thing to do. And if I understand your picture, he said, remember, us kids are now working with hieroglyphs or hieroglyphic, whatever they are, graphics, like little stick figures and images. And he said, you got to make it graphic. You got to tell me one thing to do and help me navigate. And no matter what I'm doing, help me navigate. And I'll do what you tell me to do, Mom. Just draw me a picture. And he said, I'm a contractor. I'm a guide. So do that. And I said, okay. And I said, I'll draw you a picture. And it took me 30 days or 3 months. And it took him 30 days to figure it out. I brought him this model. So that's the basis of virtually my entire talk. And now I'm going to jump through the hoops and show you some other pieces. After the last 13 years of studying the mass incarceration industry, what I realized is that fear-mongering is actually a game of domination, and it's the game that runs our commodity markets, runs our business systems, it runs our commercial systems, it runs our wars, it runs virtually everything. And in the business world and leadership, they talk about how fear is false emotions or false evidence appearing real. Well, that's one of the stories. It's also false emotions appearing real if you're working in marketing. It's false economics appearing real if you're working in economics and business. And just a few weeks ago, I finally found a model that I could use to truly anchor this conversation today. And it's Galtung's violence triangle. And he talks about it. He's done some really amazing work. And he talks about direct violence, cultural violence, and structural violence, and how this is the commercial rendition or the political rendition, the big picture rendition of Cartman-Drama triangle. So this is the Cartman-Drama triangle here on the left. It's the persecutor, victim, rescuer story. And you can draw it different ways. It doesn't matter. The fact is all these positions change direction. But this became the basis in the 1970s of a lot of our psychology and our counseling systems. And I'm not sure that actually helped us, because it actually created a really stuck story around this. I then studied with a friend of mine who helped me to do the story trap and to understand how this story becomes the educational story in media, entertainment, and marketing and education. A lot of things that we do in the world is all about the shame blame game. It's about, you know, the good guy, bad guy. It's about duality. It's about making the pain worse so that you can offer and bring in a sales pitch and solve the pain so that you can get a quick sale. So this is the story trap, the mythology of story trapping the stories that keep us bound. and hold us to consumerism. And then from that, I went and studied with a woman, Nola Ayers, and she's a coach here in Bellingham. And I asked her, I said, you know, I'd studied Bruce Lipton's work, I'd studied Greg Braden, I'd studied peak potential coaches on many, many different levels, from athletic to spiritual to whatever kind. And the woman that stood out to me was a woman by the name of Nola Ayers. And she's a gymnastics coach from Seahome High School here in Bellingham. And I mean, this is remarkable. She had a 384 wins to 1 loss coaching record. Coaching gymnasts from Seahome High School, my local high school. These are kids. They're just students, just average students. 384 to 1 coaching record. I mean, this is like a Guinness Book of World Records type thing. Like, that's extraordinary. They're gymnasts. This is not a team sport per se. It's individuals working on a team, and she got all the individuals to win. How in the world did she do that? So I called her up and I asked her, and I said, what did you do? And we spent quite a while, and I interviewed her over and over. She taught me all about, you know, the various coaches and all the things that all the other athletic coaches had done in the world, and how she did these intake forms. And I said, yes, but you're doing something different. What are you doing that nobody else is doing? There's something you're doing. What is it? And she went back and she said, she had read Joseph Campbell's work, but there was a guy by the name of Jim Lohr who wrote a book, and he talked about spiking the catecholamines and about the neuropeptides in the brain and the chemistry in the brain, and how changing the set point on the brain is what mattered. And so she said, one of the things I started to do is I started to recognize that many people say that you have to control your thought. And she said, you can't control your thoughts. Your thoughts show up. I mean, that's why we meditate and listen to the universe, right? Thoughts show up, this good thing. And she said, things happen in the world around you. It's not the thought that is the problem. The problem is how you interpret the thought. Because if this happens, how are you going to think about that? Is that a scary thing? Is that an exciting thing? What just happened to your body when I just clapped? So the way you interpret what happens to you is what causes the catecholamines and the release of neurotransmitters and things in your body that either throw you into flight, fight, or fear if you interpret it negative and scary. But the same thing happens if you're excited and enthusiastic. I mean, that could have been the starting of a horse race, and you get to run the whole lap. And that sound is really exciting because you get to show off, man. You get to run, you get to use your energy. It's a very different interpretation. One of the energies shuts your body down and puts you into constriction, and it controls the energy, it harnesses it, and eventually, if that energy gets harnessed as anger or hatred, it eventually will blow up on you. But if you harness the energy, not by holding it in, but you direct it, you redirect it, and you focus on what you're going for, now the power of passion is used to your benefit. She said, I taught my students how to spike the catecholamines when they fell off the horse, or because she said that, here's the other thing she said, in gymnastics, one of the things that you're dealing with is fear is the most scary of all things. In gymnastics is you can die in every practice. You can die, you can become paralyzed, you can break your arm, all kinds of bad things happen. So learning to manage fear when you're a gymnast is the most important thing you can do. So she said, I learned to teach my kids to spike the catecholamines so that they were relaxed, so they were fluid, they were open, they were receptive, and they were ready to produce. Key thing. So this pattern that I talked about earlier is the pattern, I call it the science of intentional bioenergetics. What I just talked about is learning to manage your bioenergetic intelligence, your emotional power center is the science of intentional bioenergetics. And at the roots of that is this model that I already spoke about. And this is the living potentials model. And if you look at it, it's very similar to the torus field. It's very similar to the way that the universe works, to how bioenergetics works, quarks, quantums, all this stuff. It's the same stuff. All I did was diagram it the way my friend Chaskatam told me to talk about humans as we grow and make it simple. So any of us, no matter what age, could learn this model, because this is like the growth rings on a tree. So I teach this in the intentional bioenergetics, the science of that. I'm teaching the biology of influences, the one that I just spoke about when we talked about spiking the catecholamines, because those enthusiastic energies, I infect people around me with fear or courage or joy energy. It influences us, it influences my body. My emotions are critical. My ability to love is the most magnificent thing we have to work with. And we all on this call have that ability. So that model sits in the middle of a past, a present, and a future, our body, our mind, and a spirit. Remember, I said a few minutes ago that when you eat food, it becomes hormones or eyeballs or, catecholamines for that matter. This is what it manifests in your physical, but every minute of every day, every split second, we're also excreting energy from our body. We're shedding our skin cells. We're breathing our energy out. Our eyes are working, and then we create waste, and that waste out of our intercellular structures has to be eliminated from the body. So we are constantly a living energy in motion, moving through time and space, and there's nothing to be afraid of, in fact, because all of us are rebuilding our bodies every few days, every few years. Depends on who you talk to. Some people say it's 7 years. Some people say, you can rebuild it spontaneous. I don't know. I don't live inside my body, so I can't see it. I don't know how fast I'm rebuilding. I just know that there's a lot of energy moving through here, and I can learn new things at enormous rates and let go of the past. So this is a key part. This is the universal pattern of living forces that I created so that we can understand that there are bacteria and parasites and bugs that help us clean our body out. There are enzymes and creative bugs that help us grow. And our process is to learn to work with these in a living spiral. So that's part of the model that I teach. And at the bottom of that is our emotions. Our emotions actually are the controlling factor. Our heart and our ability to manage our body, mind, and spirit as we connect from the earth out and use our body. We're an amazing sensory apparatus. Use our body to manage. There's a physical energetics that you can look at if you start looking at Chinese medicine and how the energetics, the dynamics of change happens. And this is again part of the Joy Triangle model work that I teach in the intentional bioenergetics. My idea today is to just give you an overview, because the point is you may never listen to me again. And you may listen to me, you may choose to take some classes or some trainings. You may already know what you know and are ready to go teach it, and I encourage you to do it. But if I can give you a couple of clues that make your presentation better, that's awesome, but you don't get it until you see the whole thing. So I'm going to run through a couple more slides quickly here. I took the model, and as I was working with the running for the Whatcom, I ended up running for Whatcom County Sheriff here in Whatcom County because I couldn't understand at the tipping point, just like when I went to Nola Ayers and asked her what the tipping point was. She said it's the energetics of change. That's this woman here that I was talking about in my Flipping the Joy Switch movie. She knew the tipping point, and it came from Jim Lohr, who was understanding the catecholamines and the tipping point inside the body that changed the set point. Now, the other woman who speaks about this is Jill Bolte Taylor. She's out there talking about the fact that she had a hemorrhagic seizure or whatever in her brain, and it was killing her, but she was a neuroscientist, and she learned how to, she stopped dying on purpose and willed herself to come back because she was a neurosurgeon, and she helped her body remember what she needed to remember to put her body back. And you can find her on TED Talk. She's amazing. But one of the things she said is that every 7 seconds you can change the set point in your brain. That's pretty phenomenal. So the bottom line is I took that knowledge and I used the same science, and I came back to the jail industry here. Our sheriff was, and the prosecutor and the executive were striving to build a 2,450 bed jail on the border here of the United States and Canada, in between Seattle and Vancouver. And that was preposterous. We only had 200,000 people living here in the whole county in the first place. Why did we need a 2,450 bed jail? I mean, it just didn't pencil for a businesswoman. It made no sense whatsoever. So I started studying it. And the short story is that I figured out that we have conditioned ourselves, just like in the Stephen Cartman drama triangle, just like in the story trapping and our stories that we use to market. We have a pattern of persecuting people, rescuing or prosecuting, rescuing or saving people, and creating victims or manipulators. So we have created this abuser, schemer, enabler triangle, similar. We've created the story of the predator, the prey or the privateer, and the parasite. These are models that are all part of the fear pattern or the decomposing or death spiral. Okay, don't get fixated on that one. It's really easy to go, oh my God, we're all dying. No, yeah, some of them, I mean, we are going to die eventually in our physical, and we may go on. I've got a whole story about that, but the body, the mind, and the spirit, we can actually put this energy to work when we understand it, to build, lead, and innovate change on purpose with intention. We can organize, we can develop, we can integrate our knowledge and put it to work on purpose with love in our heart and compassion for all the people who don't understand what we're talking about yet. We can become providers and producers and protectors of the children of the people who get wounded. We can help them grow and become richer and in love and in heart and in compassion and in skill set. And that's what this model is about, so that we can understand, how did we get in the mess we're in? Well, we bought this story, and we can change the story. We bought the story because we gave power, privilege, and prestige to our elected officials. This is key. The reason I ran for sheriff is I wanted to understand why the sheriff, even though our taxpayers voted down that jail 2 times, he's still trying to run that jail to market and pass a tax. So I ran for sheriff in 2019 to figure it out. And I finally realized that, you know what he is? That man is the CEO of law enforcement, of the jail, and of the health system. And when we went under COVID in 2020, every single sheriff in this nation suddenly became the corporate CEO by emergency mandate, because they declared a state of emergency disaster. And what that does is that changes the economic game for every county in the country. And every county then became, rules of commerce were suspended. Rules of emergencies were suspended. The sheriff took charge, at least in my county for sure. So the sheriff took charge of business in our county, and he was either able to deliver services, disaster services, or not at his discretion. He was in charge. He works in tandem with the prosecutor and with the executive in our county. But he was making the business decisions for the last 2 years. That's incredible. And what I found is that what that does when you have people who are in power, who control the money, they control the rules, they control the game, and they have a motive. His motive was to build this mass prison because he has a big goal. He's had a goal there for 20 years. He started exhibiting the behaviors of the predators, the parasites, and the profiteers. And that's heartbreaking. So I thought about it and I went, okay, how many sheriffs are there in the world, in the country? There's around 3,164 sheriffs or something. That's a niche market. In business, that's a target. That's a group of people we can talk to and we can teach them. This is what their job originally was to be protectors. We give the county money because we want to help each other. We want to help people in a disaster. We want people to come when there's an emergency, and we want them to come and help us. So we can turn the tides on these guys when they understand and get them out of fear and put them back into the provider, protector, producer role. So it's possible to, in fact, change the world. At least I've proven it to myself. So these are the roles, and this is another whole series of trainings that I'm going to do, the physics of civics. How does the physics of civics work? When you get all these dynamic parts of the civic system going, you've got the market, and you've got government, and you've got the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. So the market is like your corporate contractors. These guys team up together to create commerce. And when they're working on the dark side of this, or on the death spiral side, they break and destroy things. People are victimized. There's undermining that happens, chaos. The whole thing is to dominate so that they can win. It's the corporate model to profit. And the profiteering happens if people are going down. It's like contrarian economics. I'm really sorry. I've turned this machine off twice and it goes off again. So I'm going to try to get rid of it. So anyway, that's the negative side. But if you turn them up the other way and we teach these people how to love, I mean, Marianne Williamson was incredible running for president last year. Like Barbara Marx Hubbard did years ago. She broke the glass ceiling. Marianne Williamson infected a lot of people with hope in this country. I mean, did she win? No. But you know what? She stepped the right direction, and we can nourish and innovate and grow things in this country. So the problem we're facing is an economic problem. So in the Intentional Change Network, I'm bringing in people who understand commerce. They understand economics. They're helping us to change our minds around running this overcast system that runs the fear-based economy. This is the banks and the insurance and these industries that control. This is what the Occupy Wall Street movement was about. So that whole thing, those guys, the bankers even, are running scared. They don't know what to do. They've created this massive black hole that's sucking all the vitality out of our commerce, out of our inner cities. They don't know what to do. So we need to help them. They've created a middle caste financial system where the landed billionaires are fighting with the cloud billionaires. The world changed in 2000. So this is a whole other conversation, but we've got what I call gaposis. And people are speaking totally different languages, trying to fight over each other. And what we have to learn to do is build bridges across the gaps. So that's another whole conversation. And the whole idea of the caste war and the racial justice, those are all distractions. This is the way we can get divided. We fight with each other, we lose, we become impoverished, criminalized, persecuted, and we die. And then we become the commodity. We become the asset that the municipal corporations and the government corporations use to trade in the stock market. It's a whole other story, but it's worth understanding how it works, because once you understand that it's just a game of duality and disconnection from Mother Earth and from our hearts, it's not so scary anymore. And the bottom line is, learn to run your energy, learn to live with joy in your heart, and we can change the world. So you can join us at the Intentional Change Network. It's a part of the noblegoldman.com platform. It's a closed, you need to be invited, or you need to know who you're coming in to work with, but we're developing masterminds. We're developing training calls. A lot of it is free, costs $100 a month at the top end of it. But the whole point of the $100 a month is that it's a recirculation system, and the money goes back into building the network. It goes back into paying the people who brought you on board. And it is a stimulus that is one of those things that will create a convergent zone, if you will, or a bridge to a gifting economy where we recognize that the real value is in the exchange of ideas. The real value, the cash value, is human energy, love, compassion, and teaming up to solve problems. So that's what I'm up to. In a short, I'm going to leave this here. You can look it on it, and I can take it off of the sharing. But I'd love to entertain whatever questions we have left. Okay, I lost track of time here a little bit there, Noel and Bob. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm up for questions.
Well, Kathy Mason does have a question. How do we switch to joy from fear?
There's actually 5 ways. And you know what? You guys already know all this. This is the trippy thing. You know how to do it. Number 1, stop. Just stop. Like, stop, look, and listen. The thing that you do when you were a kid, stop, look, listen. assess, and pivot the way you consciously choose to. Use your power of choice. But when you stop, just calm down and notice what's going on around you. What is causing you to feel fear, or what's happening in the world around you? Look, stop, look, listen, assess, and pivot. It stands for SLAP, SLLAP. Slap yourself upside the head. Just stop, breathe, look around at what's moving around you. Notice the stuff that you don't see. Notice the sounds. Notice what's happening in the world around you. Listen to what's going on inside your body. Listen to what's going on. And one of the things you can do is take a drink of water. It'll change your set point in your body. It'll allow your body a chance to breathe. And eat something. I mean, seriously, when you start getting stressed out, go eat some root vegetables. Go eat a turnip or a carrot or something root grounded. Vegetables. Don't go eat a bunch of sugar, man. That's going to flip you out, send you right into fear. So start putting the food in that will root and ground you into the earth, stabilize you. And then change your target. Look and say, do I want to go into fear, or what direction do I want to go? And you change your hats. Literally, when you look at the builder, leader, innovator, the persecutor, victim, rescuer, put a hat on. When you're in fear, you might be covering yourself up. Well, if you want to pull out of those things, put on a leader's hat, put on a captain's hat, put on a fireman's hat. I don't care. Put on any hat you want that gets you.
How about a sheriff's hat?
That's it. Put you in the builder, leader, innovator thing. I put on the sheriff's hat. It's a little tricky, and I don't have a lot of hair, so it doesn't tear. I look like a peeled onion, but whatever. But if I did it with a cowboy hat with a sheriff's badge, that worked.
Right? So how did that vote go in your town?
I got about 24,000 votes. Wow. And that's pretty amazing. I didn't win, but what I did is I challenged the sheriff. But 24,000 votes, wow. That's a lot of votes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm a woman who's 65 years old, who's not a cop.
Wow.
And I got 65,000 votes. Why could I run for sheriff as a non-cop? Because the sheriff is not the street cop. The sheriff is the CEO. He's a chief executive officer. He runs the department. And I'm a businesswoman. I know how to run business. So I ran on a business ticket, on a peace officer ticket. That's how you flip from fear to joy. I'll tell you what, I was afraid when I decided to go in and register. So I walked in at high noon and registered at 12 noon on the West Coast, because I figured, if you want to do a shootout at the OK Corral, you gotta do it at noon. I wore my boots and I put on my cowboy hat. And I walked into the auditor's office and registered. And I got a phone call in about 20 minutes. He was on the phone, man. What are you doing, Joy? And I said, I'm running against you. And he said, what are you doing? And he said, you shouldn't be. What are you doing? And he said, you've got to go do all this stuff. You got to be a 25-year-old. And he tried to talk me out of it. And I said, Bill, somebody's got to run against you, because what you're doing is not right. And you know it. And I've talked to you about it. I've been fighting with you for 10 years. It's got to stop. This is not going to work. Somebody has to debate you. And so I'm running.
Wow.
I'll tell you what, that changes your courage level.
All right. Well, Kathy wants to jump in here, but before she does, I have another question. You said about when COVID happened that they could temporarily change their priorities. They basically could run.
Absolutely.
So when that happened, did that sheriff then?
He's in charge.
Did he get the jail he wanted for 20 years?
Not yet. He's working on it.
Because I was going to say, if he were, in charge, then.
He set up the system. You can go to my YouTube channel. There's a video on there called Whatcom County 98225. And in it, I give a history. It's a 90-minute video, so it's a bit long. But it's a 90-minute video, Whatcom County 98225 at Joy Gilfilen JoyTalk Civics, JoyTalk.
It's left right there.
And in that, I talk about how he set it up and how they ended up running a police event on January 21st after the riot in DC. They ran a 28 on the 28th, they ran this sheriff's event with 4 police departments to do a homeless camp sweep in our city commons at the city hall, to shut down the homeless who were protesting to get emergency services.
Wow.
And I watched that happen and I went, oh my God. He brought in the Border Patrol, the State Patrol, the Bellingham Police Department, all these people to chase away the homeless and people thought, well, he's protecting us from these protesters, the bad people who are protesting us. And I went, no, you know what? He withheld emergency support services from the homeless in the 2 years prior to that. And we were entering a winter period where the people needed emergency shelter. They needed emergency services. They were destitute in the street under COVID and all the stores are locked down. We're in a lockdown across the nation. And what were we having? We were having homeless protests and homeless sweeps. What's up with that? So the very thing that would set us up to become vulnerable to bullying, to political manipulation, to domination, to all these games is exactly what they did in Whatcom County. And I called it compound civic domestic violence. It's a different kind of trauma. And for 2 years, we have lived under these emergency COVID measures. And when that happens, read the information on emergency disasters and what happens to insurance companies, all the millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been flooding the market. It's all going to these corporations, these county-wide corporations. Those corporations are absorbing that money and they're investing it in real estate. They're not giving it to the bottom people, the people that are in the poverty cycle. They're not getting help unless they mind and follow the rules and do what the business people want them to do. The corporate leaders, our government leaders, and our contractors. So we had an economic shift in 2020 that most people don't even understand. We know that we had serious problems. We're in a depression. We're in an emotional and psychological, spiritual depression. And so bringing your love energy forward, not being afraid of it. Okay. When you face your fear, you're not afraid of it. You just recognize that it's there and you assess, you stop, you look, you listen, you assess the possibilities. When I found out I could run for sheriff, it terrified me. I didn't want to run. I'd been looking for somebody to run for sheriff so that I didn't have to. And I couldn't find anybody in town. And
Well, that's a problem everywhere. We're poll workers and in a red state. And in our county, there were 18 seats that were open. Only 4 were contested, and there were no Democrats or independents on the ticket. But speaking of Joy, yes. I want to introduce you to the person who made our logo, Kathy Mason, and she'd like to jump in the conversation here.
Please.
Well, I was taking notes as fast as I could. You're singing my tune. That's all I can tell you. I ran a division of Arthur Anderson called the Change Enablement Group.
Wow.
So yes, I had 80 people below me, and we were doing mergers and acquisitions, IT implementations, HR, and training.
Wow.
And I loved the training side. But anyway, I'm curious about change. I mean, we are right now in, and I should preface all of this. I'm very hopeful. I do everything I can to uplift and bring out resources. I do a twice a week show that I've been doing for the past 3 years.
Terrific.
Conscious business zone. So back to the question is change.
Yeah.
You have people that are not awake at all.
Yeah.
That aren't good or bad. They just are.
Yeah.
They're just in there and everything's a piece of God, in my view.
Yes.
So we get to observe everyone's journey, and it's in our view for a reason. I believe it's not just those people over there. There's something in each one of us. It's an inner work, right?
Yes.
So what is your because you didn't say it, but you had multidimensional aspects to your whole presentation.
Absolutely.
And I was like, yeah. Okay, so so how do we turn the ship or the human consciousness on?
The way we turn it around is individually. Okay, remember, every single one of us is one cell in a living organism.
Right.
The entire living organism is the cosmos.
Right.
Each cell, each time we make one choice towards joyful energy, taking courage into our own hands and making the willpower and making that choice, we change the destiny and we affect everybody around us.
Right.
So if I change one, and I'm on the call right here, and there's 9, 10, 20 of us, and every one of you guys goes out and just makes one new change. We just changed 10 degrees, right? And so the power of the collective is astronomical. You know, if you've ever made love or you know what the power of that energy force is like when things finally come together and everything explodes. That's power. And nobody's put electrodes on it and tried to figure out how to harness that power. But I'll tell you what, it creates new life.
Right.
So think about that when you're talking about it, because the power of change, I forgot to tell you the fifth thing: stop, look, listen, assess, and pivot. One of the things I learned a long time ago, because I actually was a marksman. I said I'm not a cop, but I did spend some time working in campus security and with police, and I was a marksman. And I learned that when you shoot, if you want to hit the target, you don't look at the target.
Right.
You look through the target.
That's right.
And when you look through the target, so having a vision that is so big, everybody can be included in it, is the key to making change. You don't stop at the target. I don't just want to change my little local community. If I'm going to bother to change Whatcom County and see if we can infect this thing, we're working on a project to publish a report with all the solutions that we can do. If we didn't buy a jail, what would we build? Wet houses, restorative community coalitions, centers. We would build sustainable farms. We'd build Job Corps training programs. We'd build, coaching and training leadership things. We'd build meditation, the peace circle, like what Kurt's doing. Do the peacemaking meditation, the circle. Do it everywhere. Infect everybody. And eventually these guys, they can't hold on to it, because guess what? Every one of these corporations has humans driving the ship.
Right. And that's
the key.
Yeah, because they no matter what industry they are in, they entered that job with the idea that they could make it better.
Absolutely.
Every single person wants to contribute towards betterment of our species, our Earth.
That's absolutely true. I remember sitting, and I know that we're about out of time, and I see you looking at the timer, Noelle. I get it. But I want to tell this one story. I was sitting at a reentry at a Tangled Web. It was a prison conference of some kind. And I was talking to all these people, and there were law enforcement officers and all these folks. And there was the head dude for a prison was sitting at my table, big black guy, strong, capable, scary to me, because I'd never seen a guy that big in charge of a prison before. I hadn't talked to one, right? So I'm sitting next to him, and he's looking at me going, "What are you doing?" I was going to be a presenter. And so I started to talk to him about it. And I said, "So I'm curious." I said, "What got you to become a prison warden?" And he said, you know what? He said, I wanted to make a difference in the world. I actually really wanted to do good work. And he said, I went and got my degree in social work, and I've spent about $500,000 getting all these degrees. And the only place I could get hired was in a prison.
Wow.
And he started crying.
Wow.
And he said, because I can't do what I want to do.
But who knows, there's a divine plan to all of it. So
That's right.
the perfect place for him.
That's right. And so the funny part is that when we start doing what's in our heart and we start listening to the divinity that is here, and we start watching the birds and we start watching nature and we start watching what the universe is telling us, we can change course. And every time we change course, I changed my children. I changed all those kids on the basketball team. Every single one of those people is rippling out. Every one of you has changed millions of people already, and you don't even know you did it, because we don't spend time looking at the positive. That logo you designed there, Kathy, is absolutely stunning.
It is.
It doesn't hold a candle to the one. I mean, mine doesn't hold a candle to that. Mine's really boring, but that was the best I could do. Yours is absolutely gorgeous because it's got the movement in there. And that is the power of the universe. So
Joy, we are out of time, but there are two gentlemen who have turned on their videos, and perhaps they want to join the conversation. So I'm
please.
okay with that. So Kurt, you want to go ahead?
Well, the beautiful thing about Joy is, she's so dynamic and freaking smart as attack and all that kind of good stuff. We already know that just by what she did today and what I've seen her do for the last, 2 years or so that we've known each other. In the early 1980s, I brought it into the prison system in Sweden. In the 70s, I brought it into the central cities of Los Angeles school system, bringing meditation in.
absolutely.
So that it changes people inside, and they can actually hear things as a student. They can actually pay attention because nobody's ever taught them how to. Nobody's told them how to concentrate. They tell you to, and all that good stuff. We have all the resources, and I put into the chat some links to some things that will, if you haven't seen them already, will inspire you to know that this really works big time.
Yes.
It's so needed now, and that's why we formed this intentional change network, and we're working very strongly with it. It's really starting to get those juices flowing for everybody who's coming to the table and being fed incredible stuff as you've just seen today.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank
pass
you.
it to Eric.
Thank you for those resources, and I hope some were sent directly to me privately, so make sure you have them out to everyone.
Oh, I know pretty much everyone on this chat.
Okay, very good. Okay. Eric, did you want to jump in the conversation here? You're welcome to unmute. Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah.
Well, I want to applaud Joy and all of the superb way that she's able to coalesce so many complicated things into a tangible form, and the dynamics behind that drive. I have my own little joy triangle, and that's trust, love, and presence. And she trusts. She brings a lot of trust in her heart that, we are, as she described, all basically good. I did that little exercise at the beginning, and I could think of one person that I thought was actually fundamentally evil because of what he liked to do. Out of, I don't know how many thousands of people, 10,000 or more that I've known in my life. A lot of other ones had little tinges of a little direction, but that's not,
So Eric, do you have go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to say that bringing that trust together, and that's the imagination, and having the belief that we are all loving, and that comes to an action place, and that action is having presence, having presence with what's going on, having presence in the world, having presence in the time, just being in the world and speaking your voice has to, whoa.
Wow, that's pretty funny.
It has to be the dynamic that makes things
That's
change.
pretty dynamic.
We got
Thank you.
paranormal activity.
Eric,
right.
if you have a website, I'd love for you to put that in the chat. And I don't know if you're familiar with our friends Connie and Andrew, who have the book called The Trust Frequency.
Oh, wow.
And we've had them on, actually they're part of our World Unity Week. And someone also mentioned alternatives to violence. And we had Noelle Paulette, was also one of our World Unity Week guests. And her whole family circle healing is based on the alternatives to violence organization. So I see these threads that are all weaving right here. Excellent. All those are, as this one, all these videos are on our Co-Creators Convergence archives. And so we're still uploading some of the World Unity Week, but just wanted to let you know that. So I guess it's time to say thank you to everyone for coming and joining in the conversation. Taking this overtime, Joy.
I'm sorry. But I'll tell you what.
It's all good.
When you've got
a
gift to the shift of humanity, you just can't contain it all sometimes. That's the way it is.
That's right. And the thing is that I'm so pleased, and every one of you can take this and move it. Come join us. You can join that Intentional Change Network for free and get a lot of benefits. Listen to things. We've got a lot of free episodes. We're building masterminds on there that are congruent, move in a direction. You can join it for free. If you choose to get involved, make money, refer things, earn money for other causes that you want to believe in, you can do that. But right now you can join it for free, and you can ask any one of the people, if you know other people on here who are your colleagues, ask them to invite you. Whatever works is what you do. And I just want to thank you so much for giving me the honor of speaking here today. So you can reach me at joythinks@gmail.com also.
Very
Kurt,
good.
Kurt, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. One more thing about that intentional change community and the Noble Goldman. You can learn just about anything you want on that platform that they have. They're all usually really uplifting things. Some people are into network marketing, so they go there to be able to find out how to be better at that or whatever it might be. But guess what? The end essence of it is all about paying it forward, is all about the golden rule, is all about just love and life and life and love.
Yep.
What else?
So thank you so much. Thank you, Noelle. Thank you, Bob. Thank you
You're
all.
quite welcome.